The purpose of this video is to read TCI Lesson 21, Section 8, the election of 1860 and secession. So here we have, the picture says the Palmetto State Song. It says, signers of the Ordinance of Secession, music composed and respectfully dedicated, South Carolina. So it's a songbook all about leaving the United States and being their own country, South Carolina and the South. So let's start reading. The 1860 presidential race showed just how divided the nation had become. Republicans were united behind Lincoln. Democrats had split between northern and southern factions. Faction just means a group of people with a larger group who have different ideas from the main group. Northern Democrats nominated Stephen Douglas for president. Southern Democrats supported John C. Breckinridge of Kentucky. The election got more confusing when a group called the Constitutional Union Party nominated John Bell of Tennessee. Abraham Lincoln is elected president. With his opposition divided three ways, Lincoln sailed to victory because whoever was opposing, whoever was versing Lincoln, they were all divided. If it was one strong group against Lincoln, maybe the other presidential candidate would have won, but they were all divided. But it was an odd victory. Lincoln won the presidential election with just 40% of the votes, and all of them were cast in the North. He was not even on the ballot in 10 southern states. In 1860, the 1860 election delivered a message for white Southerners. The South was now in the minority. It no longer had the power to shape national events or policies. Southerners feared that Congress would try to abolish slavery. And that, wrote a South Carolina newspaper, would mean the loss of liberty, property, home, country, everything that makes life worth having. Which is an odd thing to say on the backs of slaves. They didn't value their rights worth life. Anyway, the South secedes. Secedes means splits from the Union of the United States. Talk of secession, leaving the United States, filled the air in the weeks following the election. Senators formed a committee for another compromise that might hold the nation together. They knew that finding one would not be easy, but they still had to do something to stop the rush towards disunion and disaster. They didn't want to split, but they didn't think that there was a way to fix it. The Senate committee held its first meeting on December 20th, 1860. As the senators began their work, events in two cities dashed their hopes. They had their hopes up and no way were they going to be able to make it work. A senator named Lyman Trumbull asked President-elect Abraham Lincoln whether he could support a compromise on slavery. Lincoln's answer was clear. He would not interfere with slavery in the South. He would also support enforcement of the Fugitive Slave Act. However, Lincoln drew the line at letting slavery extend into the territories. He said, "Let there be no compromise." In Charleston, South Carolina, delegates attending a state convention voted to leave the Union that day, December 20th, 1860. The city went wild. Church bells rang and crowds filled the streets, roaring of approval. A South Carolina newspaper boldly proclaimed, "The Union is dissolved." 6 more states soon followed South Carolina's lead. Those states joined together as the Confederate States of America in February 1861. The Civil War begins. On March 4th, 1861, Lincoln became president of the not-so-united United States. Lincoln stated his belief that secession, splitting off from the United States, was wrong and unconstitutional in his inaugural speech, his very first speech that he gave as president. He appealed to the rebellious states to return to peace. In your hands, my dissatisfied fellow countrymen, and not in mine, is the momentous issue of civil war. He's saying, you guys can fix this, just come on back. On April 12th, 1861, Confederates, the states of the South now, in Charleston, South Carolina, opened fire on Fort Sumter. This fort was a federal fort in Charleston Harbor. The defenders of the fort surrendered after 30 hours of heavy shelling, heavy bombing, heavy gunfire. News that the Confederates had fired on the American fort unleashed a wave of patriotic fury in the North. All the doubts that people had about using force to save the Union vanished. A New York newspaper reported, "There is no more thought of bribing or coaxing the traitors who have dared to aim their cannonballs at the flag of the Union. Fort Sumter is temporarily lost, but the country is saved." The time for compromise was over. The issues that had divided the nation for so many years would now be decided by civil war. So no more shaking hands and fake compromises that wouldn't last. They're going to war. So answer number 1, it says, create a newspaper headline to show how most Southerners reacted to the election of Lincoln in 1860. So add a text box to number 1, and this is from the South's perspective, talking about the election of Lincoln. What did they think? Number 2, what happened in the South on each of these dates? December 20th, 1860, go up to the reading and check. February 1861, go up to the reading and check. What did Lincoln say about secession, about leaving the United States, about the United States splitting in half, in his inaugural address, in his first speech? I had just said it up there. On March 4th, 1861, what was his appeal to the rebellious southern states? What did he say? Hey guys, this is not in my hands, it's in your hands. So grab his quote from above. And lastly, number 4 says create a newspaper headline to show how most Northerners reacted to the events at Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina. So it says the New York Tribune, here's the date, and create a headline. It says, goodness, this is how the North feels. And click turn in.